It's safe to say that most Mercedes fans did not expect that George Russell would be finishing ahead of Lewis Hamilton when news broke last year that George would be taking Valtteri Bottas's seat this 2022 season. But to everyone's surprise, the young Mercedes driver has exceeded everyone's expectation and has led most of us to ask, is he Mercedes' new golden boy for the years to come? Or does Lewis still have enough left in the tank to squeeze out an 8th title and take revenge for what had happened between him and Max last season? Well, let's talk about it then. But before we do, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on our latest uploads. Now that's out of the way, let's get started. As mentioned in the intro, George has had an impressive debut season at the Silver Arrows as he sits 15 points ahead of 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton in the drivers' standings. While many may say that luck has been on Russell's side this season, it is undeniable that Russell has been consistently competitive all season, excluding the race at Silverstone where he crashed out in the opening lap of the race. And although Lewis has closed the gap to George in these past few races, former F1 champion, now pundit, Damon Hill believes that George is now much quicker than Lewis over a single lap, which he believes helped him compete more than what Lewis had expected. He may have lost his absolute speed over one lap a little bit, said Damon. George is a bit better at that right now. However, if you look at the races, you will see that Lewis is always the fastest. The younger drivers are often fast over one lap, while the experienced drivers are stronger during the race. Another former driver in Jolyon Palmer would back Russell to finish ahead of Hamilton this season if he is able to remain consistent in the final 2 races of the season. I think George will pull it off, but I think it's mainly because of the lead he already has. There are also only 2 races to go, so if he stays consistent, then he's already there. But that doesn't tell the whole story of Mercedes, Palmer explained. I think George has been impressive. If he beats Lewis, it will be an amazing achievement, but I do think the more the season's gone on, the more Lewis looks like Lewis again. But with all of that, Jolyon still believes that Lewis's experience will still help him edge out Russell should the team be a legitimate title contender next season. I think George has been impressive. If he beats Lewis, it will be an amazing achievement, but I do think the more the season's gone on, the more Lewis looks like Lewis again. At the start of the year, there was a really odd moment where everyone was a bit perplexed, thinking, is George Russell gonna outdo Lewis Hamilton? And for the first 6-7 races, it was looking that way. Now that the season has progressed, Lewis is starting to look like Lewis again. People were amazed that George was in front of him, and it looked like he would easily beat Lewis in the first 7 races. Hamilton is now really back above his teammate. If they compete for the title next year, I'll put my money on Lewis. Damon would agree and say that although George has been quicker during practice and qualifying sessions, Hamilton edges out Russell on race pace during Sundays. The younger drivers tend to be really quick over the one lap, but the more experienced drivers, you look at Fernando Alonso in the races, he's incredible. He's still creaking in qualifying, but they have this understanding of how to eke time out in a race. Quite often, Lewis is still creeping ahead of George in the last few races. He, Russell, has done an incredible first season with Lewis, but in some ways you could say he was fortunate not to get Lewis on top form at the start of the season. Many fans of the sport hoped that the 2022 season would be as electric as the 2021 season, where we saw Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton duke it out at every race weekend. But, as we all know, Mercedes has failed to make a car worthy of a championship season, which leaves Lewis having to wait till next year to get a shot at the title. And to Red Bull's head of driver development, Helmut Marko, he believes that Lewis will get his chance at redemption next season and will be a major threat to Red Bull and Max's title chances. I see Lewis Hamilton as a stronger challenger for 2023. He has a clear advantage in terms of experience, he can motivate himself incredibly well, and I'm also convinced that Mercedes will put a better car on the track next year. The former racer turned Sky Sports pundit Anthony Davidson would also agree to this, and that should Mercedes get their bearings under them next season, it'll be Lewis who will be challenging Max for the title. The only person I can see that can mount a serious challenge is Lewis Hamilton, the 43-year-old told Sky Sports News. There's a handful of names who, in my opinion, have been the greatest of all time, and they only come along once in a while. Then it's great to see that next one come along, and they set the benchmark, and as one athlete becomes older, the next one comes along. But it's never been a given, and I don't know who the next Max Verstappen will be that comes along one day to bring the fight to him. But Lewis at the moment, he's definitely still good enough without question, and he's the only one that can take this fight to Max. The problem is, as an older athlete, you start to lose a bit of performance. That hasn't happened yet with Lewis, but at some point it's inevitable, and that's the advantage Max has. Davidson would also add that the passing of the torch has been a cyclical process in the sport that has repeated itself time and time again. It's a generational thing. I've seen this many times in the past in Formula One, he said. I've seen the likes of Ayrton Senna come along, who replaced Alain Prost in that bid to see who was the best driver. Then we saw Michael Schumacher come along. He supersedes Senna, and Senna got older, and Lewis Hamilton came along, supersedes Schumacher, and now Verstappen comes along. It's not really a fair fight in many ways, because Verstappen is 25 years old, almost 10 years younger than Lewis. That's a generational thing. It's cyclical, and it's great to see a new talent come along because it doesn't happen very often. And as these last two races are more formalities rather than real competition for Mercedes, team boss Toto Wolff and the team's technical director would confirm that the team is planning to make a major overhaul to their concept to give both George and Lewis the best chance of winning a title next season. We need to go into the winter and do a good job, and that's the only way we'll get on par with them and hopefully beat them. Next year's car will look different. I'm not going to say why, but it will look different, said Elliott. Well, Toto, on the other hand, would say, I think the DNA of the car is going to change for next year, that's clear. It doesn't necessarily mean that the bodywork is going to look very different, but certainly what is part of the DNA of the car will change for next year. And there you have it, guys. So what is as much a surprise for you to see George outperforming Lewis this season? And will we see a feistier 2023 season between Lewis and Max? Let us know in the comments section below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't.